Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to take some old pallets and turn them into some great usable timber. If you love DIY projects or you want to learn how to repurpose wood, you're in the right place. So first things first is, where do we find these pallets? You can often find them for free at nearby businesses, warehouses, or even just in your local area. I prefer to try and find these thicker pallets and pallet crates. This is because the wood's usually thicker and better, and I get these from a local stove supplier near me. Just make sure that the wood's in good condition and look out for any markings on the wood. Look for stamps like HT, which is heat treated, and avoid pallets marked with MB, which means they're treated with toxic chemicals. Most pallets that you find in the UK at least will probably be heat treated, but make sure you avoid the painted ones. Now that we've got our pallet, it's time to disassemble them. This can be a little bit tricky, but with the right tools and techniques, you can disassemble these pallets pretty quickly and pretty easily. I like to use a pry bar and a hammer to split each nailed section apart. I sometimes use the hammer against the board to separate it from the others. It's better to use a sacrificial bit of wood for this to prevent the hammer from denting the wood. I then knock the nails out with a hammer, or if I know the dimensions of the pieces needed, I sometimes just remove the ends with a miter saw. If any of the boards are damaged or have split ends, I cut these off before starting, as these pieces aren't usable anyway, so there's no point in wasting time on them. You can also use a reciprocating saw and just run this down the edge of the pallet, and then this will obviously remove all your nails for you. You then just have to pry the centre away from the blocks or the stretcher piece. Once I have the pieces, next up is turning this into some clean and usable wood. I used to just sand any pallet wood that I was using, either with belt sander or random mobile sander, but I recently got myself a planer thicknesser. So today I'm going to be showing you my milling process. Before I start, I like to use this stud finder, which has got a built-in metal detector, just to make sure there's no hidden nails or pieces of metal left. And if there is, I obviously either scrap the piece if I can't find it, or remove the nail if I can. If you're just sanding the boards, this doesn't matter too much. Worst thing you're going to do is potentially rip a sanding disc, but when you're using a planer thicknesser, obviously you don't want to chip or blunt your blades. I do this two different ways depending on the project. If I just want each face clean and I'm not too worried about the corners being square, then I run each one through the top planer, or the jointer if you're American. This cleans each face up nicely and it takes minimal time. But if I need the boards to have a 90-degree square edge, firstly I make one flat face, running the piece over the planer. I can then use this as a reference along the fence to create a square edge on each side. If I'm doing a lot of boards at once, I'll do this process for all of the boards, and then I mark on the non-milled faces with a pencil. I'm only going to do the short boards for this video, but the process is just exactly the same for the longer ones. Once I've got 3 clean faces, I'm going to turn the planer into thicknesser mode and then place the clean side down on the thicknesser bed and run this through the thicknesser. This is going to allow me to make a face that is parallel to the opposite side. If the wood's fairly dirty or aged, you can clearly see when the whole face is being flattened, but if it's cleaner wood, the pencil mark from earlier becomes a visual reference for when you've removed enough material. You can then remove material from either side until you reach your desired thickness. Now we're ready to cut the boards to size. I'm using a miter saw for a clean straight cut at 90 degrees. If I'm doing this for a particular project, obviously I'll cut these to the exact size that I need. And I'll often use some tape or sacrificial pieces of wood just to reduce the tear out. If I'm just milling up some stock for future use, I'll just square up the ends at the longest possible dimension. After that, it's time for sanding. When sanding, you want to start with a rougher grit and gradually move to a finer grit to get that smooth finish. The grit you're going to start with will depend on the finish that your planer gives you. I often find that hardwoods are left with quite a good finish, so they'll often just need sanded at 120 and 240 grit. But softer woods like pine might need to be sanded at a lower grit and then obviously work your way up through the grits. This step really enhances the wood, preparing it for any finish that you're going to apply later. And this is the final product. I've transformed this pallet wood that was scrap into some good usable lumber for my next project. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more DIY projects. Have you ever worked with pallet wood? Share your experiences down below in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.